Welcome to IRIS online classes. In the last session, we discussed the rules in the topic parajumbles. This session will go for an exercise on parajumbles. We'll try solving the questions based only on the rules we discussed. Now, as I told you, there's no need for us to understand the meanings of the sentences. If we try to understand the meanings of the sentences, it becomes a waste of time. You forget about the options, apply the concepts onto the sentences, find out the mandatory pairs, and move on to the options only to start the elimination process. When you find a mandatory pair, see how many options can be eliminated using that mandatory pair. Now, sometimes with one mandatory pair, 3 options can be eliminated. Now, at least one option can be eliminated with the help of one mandatory pair. So we'll apply the concepts onto the sentences, we'll find out the mandatory pairs, and then we'll move on to the options just to start the elimination process. Now, don't miss any indicator while reading, don't miss any pronoun while reading. In fact, indicators and pronouns will surely help us a lot while approaching questions on parajumbles. Right? Come to the first one. I'll read very quickly, then I'll tell you how to find out the mandatory pairs and how to eliminate the options using the mandatory pairs. Come to the first one. But not his prescription. Nobody knows this better than JP himself. JP's diagnosis of what is wrong with India remains as true in the new millennium as it was 40 years ago. Just on the touchstone of what he said, there should be some space actually. What he said, set out to do, his career cannot be regarded as a success. Now, but is a contrast indicator. Can the paragraph start with A? No. In option A, in sentence A, we have only one idea. Not his prescription. There's only one idea in option A along with an indicator. Now, when there's only one idea in a sentence along with an indicator, and I told you when an indicator connects two sentences, the indicator must come in the second sentence. So there should be a sentence immediately before A, because A contains only one idea with an indicator. So there must be a sentence immediately before A. So the paragraph cannot start with A. Based on that, option D is eliminated. There is one more reason to say that the paragraph cannot start with A, because his is a pronoun. Every pronoun must refer to a noun immediately before it. So immediately before A, there must be another sentence. So because of two reasons, because of the indicator but and because of the pronoun his, we can say that the paragraph cannot start with A. Come to B. Nobody knows this better than JP himself. Can the paragraph start with B? No, because this is a pronoun, demonstrative pronoun. So immediately before B, there must be another sentence. So paragraph cannot start with B. Anyway, there's no option starting with B. Fine, leave. Can the paragraph start with C? Yes. JP's diagnosis of what is wrong with India remains as true in the new millennium as it was 40 years ago. The paragraph can start with C. Fine, leave it. Can the paragraph start with D? Judged on the touchstone of what he set out to do, his career cannot be regarded as a success. He is a pronoun. Immediately before the sentence, there must be a sentence containing a noun. So the paragraph cannot start with D. Based on that, A and C are eliminated. The answer must be option B. Clear? Where instead of trying to understand the meanings of the sentences, we eliminated options and got the answer based only on the concepts we discussed in the basics part. Getting it? Come to the next one. Close encounters of the third kind. What happens when West meets East? Complete with Hati, Bagh, Thali, Tikka, Tandoor and Turkey. All this spread out in Chatpada Belpuri along with IT, BT, Sycoons and Sunrise Sarjis, waiting for a tryst with the Atlantic, keep us part big dead. Now, I'll ask you questions and then I'll tell you how to eliminate options. Come to sentence C. Complete with Hati, Bagh, Thali, Tikka, Tandoor and Turkey. Complete with is a support indicator. Now I tell you, if you miss a pronoun or indicator, you will not get the answer. Trust me. Or you'll get the answer if you try to understand the meanings of the sentences. Trying to understand the meanings of the sentences will surely consume a lot of time. Instead, just go by the concepts to eliminate the options and get our answer in no time. Never miss any indicator, never miss any pronoun while reading. You have to by heart the list of indicators. Contrast, support, cause and effect. We have already discussed the application of the concept indicators in the case of grammar-based questions. Now it is about the application of indicators in the case of verbal logic questions. We have come across the application of indicators in reading comprehension. Now it's para-jumbles. Indicators is a very important concept. Complete with, C says complete with. Complete with is a support indicator. I gave you the list of support indicators and we have only one ID in option C, in sentence C. So the paragraph cannot start with C. Based on that, easily A and B are eliminated. Now we have only two options left, C and D. Now D says all this. All this in the sense, immediately before the sentence, there must be mention about some plural nouns. Only then we can say all this. Now in which sentence do we have plural nouns? Sentence C. Hathi, Bagh, Thali, Tikka, Tandoor and Turkey. So all this refers to what is mentioned there in sentence C. So CD must be a mandatory pair. We have only two options left, C and D. In C and D, we have CD as mandatory pair. So we cannot get any help from that mandatory pair now. Right. Now, we have an interrogative sentence here. Sentence B. Sentence B is an interrogative sentence because it ends with a question mark. What happens when West meets East? Question mark. Now, my question is, the answer to this question is given among the sentences or not? That is my question. I say the answer to this question is given among the sentences. If the answer to a question is not given among the sentences, the interrogative sentence must be the last sentence in the order. That is a rule we discussed. B is an interrogative sentence. There is no option ending with B. That means the answer to this question is given among the sentences. And if the answer is given, the sentence that is the question and the sentence that is the answer must come together, can be called a mandatory pair. Now we have two options left, C and D. C says BA. BA in the sense A is the answer to B because B is an interrogative sentence. The question and the answer must come together. Option D says BC. BC in the sense C is the answer to B. Now we need to find out whether A or C is the answer to B. Come to Bombay. What happens when West meets East? Come to sentence C. Complete with Hathi, Bagh, Thali, Tikka, Tandoor and Turkey. Can C be the answer to B? No, the answer cannot start with an indicator. The answer cannot, a sentence or answer will not start with an indicator. So C cannot be the answer to B. Based on that, option D is eliminated. Now we have only one option left, option C. Now we will find out whether A can be the answer to B or not. B says, what happens when West meets East? A says, complete encounter, close encounters of the third kind. Encounter means meeting. So close encounters of the third kind. Encounter is the same as meeting. So A can be the answer to B. So BA must be a mandatory pair. The answer is options. Getting it? Come to the next one. This has also been my experience with creativity within organizations. Creativity is a wonderful thing which finds favor with everyone. And most organizations claim to be creative, at least in their corporate advertising. Sir Colin Marshall, Chief Executive of British Airways, the world's largest international carrier, tells us how he eventually discovered that unless there was a nominated champion who was given responsibility for making something happen, nothing ever did happen. Yet nothing much gets done beyond this lip service because what is everyone's business becomes no one's business. Come to sentence A. Can the paragraph start with A? No. Because this is a demonstrative pronoun, also is a support indicator. The paragraph cannot start with A and there is no option starting with A. Can the paragraph start with D? No. Yet is a contrast indicator. I gave you the list of contrast indicators. So paragraph cannot start with D. Based on that, option D is eliminated. Because option D starts with the sentence D. Fine. Now, the sentence, the very first statement says, this has also been my experience. This has also been my experience means, if a sentence says this has also, support indicator, this has also been my experience, immediately before the sentence, there must be a sentence containing mention about a person's experience. In which sentence do you find mention about a person's experience? In sentence C. In sentence C, we have mentioned about a person's experience. So CA must be a mandatory pair, and CA as mandatory pair comes in two options, A and B. Based on that, option C is eliminated. Now we have two options left, A and B. Now, two sentences contain mention about the word creativity. Which two sentences? Sentences A and B contain mention about the word creativity. So these two sentences must come together, mandatory pair. A and B must appear together. Based on that, Bombay is eliminated. The answer is option A. C-A-B-D. Clear? C-A-B-D. Actually, yes. B-D is a mandatory pair. D says, yet nothing much gets done beyond this lip service. If a sentence says this lip service, sentence says this girl, immediately before the sentence, there must be a sentence containing mention about girl. Only then we can say this girl. If a sentence says these boys, immediately before it, there must be a sentence containing mention about boys. Only then we can say these boys. Come to Bombay. I said BD is a mandatory pair. Creativity is a wonderful thing which finds favor with everyone. And most organizations claim to be creative. Claiming to be creative is the same as lip service. That means only claims will happen, actions won't happen. That means they don't bring it to reality, they just speak it. They just speak about it. Just claim it, they won't bring it to reality. So claims to be creative is the same as this lip service. BD is a mandatory pair. And if you notice, BD as mandatory pair comes only in one option, that is option A. Getting it? If you're getting the answer with the answer with just one concept, leave that question there because we got the answer. Move on to the next question because without wasting our time. Come to the next one. One day, a 17-year-old boy came to visit his brothers and asked, "Why don't you stand up and fight the giant?" We all know the story of David and Goliath, in which there was a giant who was bullying and harassing the children in the village. But David said, "No, he's too big to hit, he's too big to miss." The brothers were terrified and they replied, "Don't you see he's too big to hit?" Now, in this passage, we have interrogative sentences. A question and the answer to the question must appear together. And if the answer to the question is not given among the sentences, the interrogative sentence must be the last sentence in the order. We have discussed 8 concepts. Never miss any concept, because we don't know based on which concept we'll get a help. The first sentence says, one day a 17-year-old shepherd boy came to visit his brothers and asked, "Why don't you stand up and fight the giant?" The boy asked his brothers. The boy asked his brothers. So who should reply? The brothers should reply. The boy asked his brothers, so brothers should reply. The brothers' reply is given in which sentence? Sentence D. The brothers were terrified and they replied. They refers to the brothers. So according to sentence A, the boy asked his brothers. So his brothers should reply, and his brothers' reply is given there in sentence D. The brothers were terrified and they replied, "Don't you see he's too big to hit?" So AD must be a mandatory pair. AD must be a mandatory pair. Now we have found one mandatory pair. We'll see how many options can be eliminated using that mandatory pair. This one, AD. How many options is the AD as mandatory pair? Only one option, that is option A. So easily B, C and D are eliminated. The answer is option A. Naturally, verbal logic questions, reading comprehension, para-jumbles, closed tests, all these will be fine only with practice. And that too practicing with the help of concepts. No guesswork at all. We have other mandatory pairs as well. I say DC is a mandatory pair. D says, the brothers were terrified and they replied, "Don't you see he's too big to hit?" C says, but David says, he is too big to hit. He's too big to hit. He's too big to miss. So D and C talk about the same idea. So DC must also be a mandatory pair. DC as mandatory pair comes in two options, A and D, but AD as mandate repair comes only in one option, that is option A. So the answer must be option A. Clear? Come to the next one. This cycle of complexity combined with the number of units in one location has multiplied the dangers of a possible accident. Increase in unit size, however, increases its complexity again creating more chances of failure. Nuclear manufacturers then ramp up unit sizes to make plants more economical. The problem here is that the more we learn about nuclear energy, the more we realize the need for new safety systems, all of which add to costs. Come to the very first statement, sentence A. This cycle of complexity. As I told you earlier, the sentence says this girl. Immediately before it, there must be a sentence containing mention about girl. Only then we can say this girl. So the sentence says this cycle of complexity. Immediately before this sentence, there must be a sentence containing mention about complexity, undoubtedly. In which sentence do you find mention about complexity? The mention about complexity comes only in one sentence, other than option A, that is sentence B. So mention about complexity comes in sentence B. Option A says this cycle of complexity, so undoubtedly BA must be a mandate repair. Now move on to the options. How many options with BA as mandate repair? BA as mandate repair comes only in one option, that is option B. So easily A, C and D are eliminated. The answer must be Bombay. One reason. Now there are many concepts can be applied here, but we got the answer with one concept. We're happy. We're moving on to the next question. But still here in the session, at the time of the examination, move on to the next question. Immediately go get the answer for one question. Answer to one question. Here we'll discuss. Now, can the paragraph start with A? No. This is a pronoun. So immediately before it, there must be a sentence containing mention about noun. Mention about a noun. So the paragraph cannot start with A. Based on that, option D is eliminated because D starts with A. Come to sentence B. Increase in unit size, however, increases its complexity, again creating more chances of failure. Can the paragraph start with B? No, because however is a contrast indicator. Its is a pronoun. So we have a contrast indicator here and a pronoun here. So immediately before the sentence, there must be another sentence. The paragraph cannot start with B. Based on that, option A is eliminated. Come to C. Nuclear manufacturers then ramp up unit sizes to make plants more economical. Can the paragraph start with C? No, because then is a cause and effect indicator. I gave you the list of cause and effect indicators. Nuclear manufacturers then ramp up unit sizes to make plants economical. There is only one idea in this sentence. Ramp up unit sizes to make plants more economical. There is only one idea in this sentence along with an indicator. So this sentence must be connected to another sentence immediately before it. That means immediately before this sentence, there must be another sentence. Because this sentence contains only one idea with an indicator. The paragraph cannot start with C. Based on that, option C is also gone. Now we have only one option left, option B. So we got the answer using another concept as well. Right? Thinking in different ways. Getting it? Come to the next one. The Green Revolution may have led to a period of food self-sufficiency, but that input-intensive strategy has now run its course and is yielding diminishing returns even while generating widespread environmental degradation. The prolonged and unprotected handling of toxic chemicals is also exposing our farmers to multiple health problems whose economic and social costs are rarely considered. In India, we face a crisis in agriculture because it is land land, energy and water intensive, and all three resources are becoming increasingly scarce. The heavy use of chemical fertilizers and toxic pesticides has ravaged the soil and contaminated our food chain and water supply. The same word is used in two sentences. Which word and which two sentences? Toxic chemicals is talked about in two sentences. Sentences B and D. B and D contain mention about toxic chemicals. So B and D must come together. How many options do we have where B and D come together? Come to this. B in option A, B and D are separated by C. Cannot happen, eliminated. In option B also, B and D are separated by C. Cannot happen, eliminated. In option C, D and B are separated by CA. Cannot happen, eliminated. In option D, B and D are coming together. The answer must be option D. When you find the same word mentioned in two sentences, those two sentences must come together. It means that if you have the same word mentioned in two sentences, it means that those two sentences are talking about the same idea. The sentences that talk about the same idea must be brought together and they can be called a mandatory pair. So B and D contain mention about toxic chemicals. So B and D must anyway come together. The order can be DB or BD depending on the options. Only in one option we have sentences D and B together, and that option is option D. So easily, based on the simple concept, A, B and C are eliminated. The answer must be D. Clear? Come to the next one. The most important ones are family and school. Much of the anger that is publicly expressed against the hierarchy of caste in the newspapers, on television, in conferences is purposeless if not insincere. Those who are serious about carrying the advance of equality further, particularly in the domain that I have discussed, must direct their attention to the institutions that are the real obstacles in the path of that advance. Equality, at least at the higher levels of society, can no longer be significantly advanced by attacking caste. Can the paragraph start with sentence A? No. Sentence A is like an example. It says the most important ones are the family and school. Sentence A is like an example. A paragraph cannot start with an example. Anyway, based on that concept, yes, one option is eliminated. Option C. Option C is gone. I say CA is a mandatory pair because C says those who are serious about carrying the advance of equality further, particularly the domain that I have discussed, must direct their attention to the institutions that are the real obstacles in the path of that advance. Institutions that are the real obstacles in the path of that advance. Come to option A. The most important ones are the family and school. The family and school are the institutions being talked about in the paragraph. It must be the school. It's a printing mistake. The rule regarding and that we discussed in subjective agreement. These two are two different institutions. The family and the school. So the institutions refer to the family and the school. The most important ones means the most important institutions are the family and the school. So an example always supports a statement that comes immediately before it. So CA must be a mandatory pair. We have two options with CA as mandatory pair. Options A and B. So based on that, C and D are eliminated. Now we have only two options left, A and B. Now two sentences talk about caste. Caste is talked about in sentences D and B. So these two must come together. Now A says BD, B says DB. So now we need to find out whether it must be DB or BD. Now I told you about the concept of general and specific. When you find one word mentioned in two sentences, based on the information given in those two statements, identify which is general, which is specific. The general statement and the specific statement together can be called a mandatory pair. It's not specific and general together. First general, then specific. So the general statement and the specific statement together can be called a mandatory pair. Now we need to find out whether B is general or D is general. D says equality, at least at the higher levels of society, can no longer be significantly advanced by attacking caste. D says much of the anger that is publicly expressed. Much of the anger means general or specific? Specific. So much of the anger that is publicly expressed against the hierarchy of caste. Now here, B and D talk about attacking caste. Caste is getting attacked. Much of the anger means it is very specific because much of is a determiner telling us about the quantity of a noun, specific. So D is general, B is specific. It's always general and specific. So here the mandatory pair must be DB and not BD. Based on that, DB must be mandatory pair. Based on that, A is eliminated. The answer must be option B, DBC. Clear? The concept of general and specific comes here. The concept of examples also comes here. Getting it? Come to the next one. One has to see if this is just a bubble and if it will burst. Biotech stocks have recently set the bourses on fire. Companies like Indrani Biotech have quoted a 200% rise. The latest craze for biotech shares led to a spurt in their prices. Spurt means a sudden rise or sudden increase in the prices. Come to sentence A. Can the paragraph start with A? No, because this is a pronoun. So immediately before the sentence, there must be a sentence containing mention about a noun. So paragraph cannot start with A. Based on that, option B is eliminated. Can the paragraph start with C? No, C is an example. I gave these words together as an example, like, similarly, such as, for instance, as an illustration, likewise. All these mean the same. Companies like Indrani Biotech means Indrani Biotech, the company Indrani Biotech is used as an example by the author. A paragraph cannot start with an example. Based on that, no options can be eliminated because there's no option starting with C. Now, in three sentences we find mention about the same word. Which word and which three sentences? Biotech. Biotech is mentioned in 3 sentences, B, C and D. So these 3 must come together. Based on that, option C is eliminated because C and B are separated by A. Cannot happen, eliminated. Option D is also eliminated because D and B are separated by A. Cannot happen, gone. Now we have only one option left, option A. B, D and C. B, D and C contain mention about the word biotech, and these 3 are coming together in option A. The answer must be A. Now I say that DC is a mandatory pair. D says the latest craze for biotech shares led to a spurt in their prices, sudden rise or increase in their prices. Companies like Indrani Biotech have quoted a 200% rise. Spurt is the same as rise in the price. 200% rise. This is an example to C is an example to option D. Both talk about the same idea. DC must be a mandatory pair. If you check, DC as mandatory pair comes in 2 options, A and C. Anyway, we eliminate option C. The answer must be option A. B, D, C. Clear? Come to the next one. In 220 BC, a war started between Rome and Carthage. Hannibal did not let that keep him from believing that he could win and then acting on that belief. Never miss any indicator or pronoun while reading. Hannibal's troops were greatly outnumbered and had fewer weapons and supplies than the great Roman army. Hannibal was from the city of Carthage, whose arch enemies were the Romans. Now, my question is, can B or C come before D? Can B or C come before D? No. Because Hannibal is getting introduced in sentence D. Hannibal was from the city of Carthage, whose arch enemies were the Romans. B says Hannibal did not let that keep him. C says Hannibal's troops. So Hannibal is getting introduced in D. So B or C cannot come before D. B or C cannot come before D. Based on that, option A is eliminated. Yes, option A is eliminated. Clear? Come to sentence B now. Hannibal did not let that keep him from believing that he could win and then acting on that belief. That is a pronoun. Every pronoun must refer to a noun immediately before it. I say that CB is a mandatory pair. C says, Hannibal's troops were greatly outnumbered and had fewer weapons and supplies than the great Roman army. Now come to B. Hannibal did not let that keep him from believing that he could win. That refers to being outnumbered and possessing fewer weapons and supplies than the great Roman army. So CB is a mandatory pair. CB as mandatory pair comes in two options. CB as mandatory pair comes only in two options. So based on that, C is eliminated, D is eliminated. CB as mandatory pair comes in A and B. Anyway, A is already eliminated. The answer must be option B. D is C. One more thing. Three sentences talk about the same idea. Now, the same topic. Now, the sentences talk about the same topic must be brought together. Three sentences talk about the same topic, and those three sentences are A, C, B. A, C and B talk about war, whereas D doesn't talk about war. Now I told you all the sentences talking about the same topic must come together and they can be called a mandatory pair. Come to A, C, B, we'll see whether these three are talking about war or not. In 220 BC, a war started between Rome and Carthage. C says, Hannibal's troops were greatly outnumbered during the war. Greatly outnumbered and had fewer weapons related to war and supplies than the great Roman army. Now come to B. Hannibal did not let that keep him from believing that he could win. He could win means win the war and then acting on that belief. So A, C and B are talking about war. D doesn't talk about war. So D must be separate from these three. D must start the paragraph because Hannibal is getting introduced in D. The answer must be option B, D, A, C. Getting it? One more reason to eliminate option A is D is coming at the end. Hannibal is getting introduced in D. Cannot come at the end. Eliminate. It should come at the beginning action. And two options are starting with D, B and C. C is anyway gone. The answer must be B. Because BC is not a mandatory pair. CB is a mandatory pair. We have a pronoun in B. So CB is a mandatory pair and not BC. The answer must be option B, D, A, C. Getting it? Come to the next one. They are the moments when we must prove to our customers that SAS is their best alternative. Thus, SAS is created 50 million times a year, 15 seconds at a time. Last year, each of our 10 million customers came in contact with approximately 5 SAS employees, and this contact lasted an average of 15 seconds each time. These 50 million moments of truth are the moments that ultimately determine whether SAS will succeed or fail as a company. Now, I told you, if a sentence says these girls, immediately before it, there must be a sentence containing mention about girls. Only then we can say these girls. And those two sentences must come together. These is a demonstrative pronoun. Never miss any pronoun or indicator while reading. If a sentence says these 50 million moments of truth, immediately before the sentence, there must be a sentence containing mention about 50 million. Only then we can say these 50 million moments of truth. In which sentence do you find mention about 50 million? Sentence B. So undoubtedly, I can say BD is a mandatory pair. BD is a mandatory pair. Now move on to the options. How many options with BD as mandatory pair? Only one option, option C. So easily A, B and D are eliminated. We got the answer, the answers. Now we'll think about some other concepts as well. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, the answer is C. Now we'll think about some other concepts. Can the paragraph start with A? No. Because they is a pronoun. The paragraph cannot start with A. Anyway, there's no option starting with A. Can the paragraph start with B? No. Because thus is a cause and effect indicator. I gave in the list of cause of indicators. Thus is a cause of indicator. So paragraph cannot start with B. There's no option starting with B. Can the paragraph start with D? No. These is a demonstrative pronoun, so paragraph cannot start with D. Based on that concept, options A and B are eliminated. Because A and B start with D, gone. Anyway, BD must be a mandatory pair, and BD as mandatory pair comes only in one option, that is option C. Getting it? We are selecting and eliminating options based only on the concepts we discussed. Right? No guesswork, no trying to understand we are not trying to understand the meanings of sentences. We're just trying to get the answer only with the help of the concepts. Come to the next one. What we have long considered to be mass culture has increasingly become a collection of niche cultures. While the effects of downloading are often discussed, it's not just the music delivery system that has changed. That is true for media in general, as the 3 broadcast television networks became the 100+ channels of digital cable or satellite. People are buying less music today than in previous years. Fine. Can the paragraph start with B? No. While the effects of downloading, the paragraph cannot start with B. Based on that, option B is eliminated. 2 sentences contain mention about the same word. Which word and which 2 sentences? Music is talked about in 2 sentences. Yes. Sentences B and D contain mention about music. So B and D must come together. Based on that, option A is eliminated. B and D are separated by C. Option D is eliminated. B and D are separated by C. Gone. We got the answer. The answer is option C. D, B, A, C. Now here, I told you B and D talk about music. So these 2 must come together. The paragraph cannot start with C. The C says that is true for media. That is a demonstrative pronoun. Actually, there is no option starting with C. BD must come together. The only option where BD comes together. B is anyway gone. Answer is C. And C says DB. Now in 2 sentences, we have mentioned about the same word. So based on the information given in the 2 sentences, we need to find out which one is general, which one is specific. The general statement and the specific statement must be brought together and can be called a mandatory pair. Now, according to the answer, D must be general, B must be specific. Because here the option says DB. We'll find it out. People in general. People are buying less music today than in previous years. Come to Bombay. While the effects of downloading are often discussed, it is not just a music delivery system that has changed. So D is anyway general, B is specific, talks about the music delivery system. Here this talks about people buying less music. D is general, B is specific, and it's always general and specific. So DB must be the mandatory pair. So the answer is option C. Clear? Come to the next one. The style of government used by many of these city-states is generally regarded as the forerunner, if not the direct ancestor of the constitutional democracies of the contemporary West. Perhaps the most influential of the classical discussions of the nature of politics has been Aristotle's book Politics. Indeed, as we have seen, the word politics is itself closely related to the Greek word of these city-states. These city-states, polis. Modern political systems have their roots to a large extent in the ancient Greek city-states. Now, can the paragraph start with A? No. Because A says these city-states. These is a demonstrative pronoun. If a sentence says these city-states, immediately before it, there must be a sentence containing mention about city-states. So paragraph cannot start with A. Based on that, option A is eliminated. Can the paragraph start with B? No. B says perhaps. Perhaps, a sentence cannot start with perhaps. It's like an indicator kind of. It cannot start with B. Perhaps means like sometimes and all. So B cannot start the paragraph. Anyway, there's no option starting with B. Fine. In 3 sentences, we find mention about city-states. Which 3? A, C and D contain mention about city-states. So A, C and D must come together. Based on that, option B is eliminated. A, C and D must come together. Now in option B, D and A are separated by B. Cannot happen, so eliminated. A, D and C must come together. In option C, C and A are separated by B. Cannot happen, eliminated. We got the answer DACB. DAC. DAC are coming together. The answer must be option D. Now the paragraph cannot start with C because indeed the paragraph cannot start with C. Based on the anyway, option C is gone. The answer must be option D. D, A, B, C. Clear? So mention about city states comes in A, C and D. So these three are coming together in option D. That concept is completely fine. The answer must be option D. Come to the next one. Truth was an automatic hereditary property of theorem hood. Mathematical statements in such systems are patterns made up of arbitrary symbols. The beauty of a mechanistic vision of mathematics was that it eliminated all need for thought or judgment. As long as the axioms were true statements, falsehood simply could never creep in. Can the paragraph start with B? No. B says mathematical statements in such systems. So paragraph cannot start with B. Based on that, option C is eliminated. Can the paragraph start with the D? No. D says as long as. So based on that, option D is eliminated. Now we have only two options left, A and C. Two sentences talk about truth. Which two? D and A talks about truth. So D and A must come together. D says as long as the axioms were true statements, falsehood simply could never creep in. A says truth was an automatic hereditary property of theorem hood. So D, A must come together. Based on that, A is gone. The answer must be option B. So the answer is option B, C, D, A, B. Actually come to C, D. The beauty of a mechanistic vision of mathematics was that it eliminated, the mechanistic vision of mathematics eliminated all need for thought or judgment. There's no need for us to go for any kind of judgment or thought. As long as the axioms were true statements. Now as these are true statements, there's no need for us to go for any kind of thought or judgment. So CD anyway must be a mandatory pair, and if you check, CD as mandatory pair comes in two options, A and B, but DA as mandatory pair comes in one option, that is option B. D is anyway eliminated, so the answer must be Bombay. Clear? Come to the next one. Biblical narrative especially tends to work with a very limited vocabulary and consistently avoids metaphors that can seem the very antithesis of style. Saint Augustine in the late 4th century AD confessed that biblical style exhibits the lowest of language. It is easy to see what he means. Then readers have not traditionally gone to the Bible in search of literary artfulness, but rather for its religious value, that is, as a source of theology or of ethics. It is hard to deny that in many respects the Bible is the most unliterary work of literature that we have. Now two sentences talk about biblical narrative, and those two sentences are A and B. Biblical style, biblical narrative is talked about in two sentences, A and B. So these two must come together. Now we'll read A and B once again and find out which is general, which is specific. Come to A. Biblical narrative especially tends to work with. Especially tends to work with means it is very specific. Especially tends to work with a very limited vocabulary and consistently avoids the metaphors that can seem to be the very antithesis of style. Saint Augustine in the late 4th century AD confessed that biblical style exhibits the lowest of language. It is easy to see what he means. Especially means very specific. B is general, A is specific. So BA must be a mandatory pair. BA as mandatory pair comes in three options: A, B and C. So option D is eliminated. Now one more reason, here it says, B says, the biblical narrative exhibits the lowest of language. It is easy to see what he means. Come to A once again. Biblical narrative especially tends to work with a very limited vocabulary and consistently avoids metaphors that can seem the very antithesis of style. So biblical narrative uses very limited vocabulary. That means it goes to simple language and constantly avoids metaphors. No kind of metaphor will be there. Very limited vocabulary will be used. So it is very easy for people to understand. And avoid using very limited vocabulary and consistently avoiding metaphors refers to the lowest of language. The lowest of language can be referred to as very limited vocabulary and using very limited vocabulary and constantly avoiding metaphors. So BA must be a mandatory pair. Two sentences talk about Bible. Which two? C and D. C and D talk about the Bible. So these two must come together. Based on that, Bombay is eliminated. D and C are separated. Yeah. Now we have two options left, A and C. The paragraph cannot start with sentence C because then is a cause and effect indicator. So that is eliminated. Now we have two options left, A and C. A starts with D. D says, "It is hard to deny." It is a pronoun. Based on that, option A is eliminated. The answer must be option C. C starts with B. Yeah, the paragraph can start with B. Saint Augustine in the late 4th century AD confessed that biblical style exhibits the lowest of language. So answer must be B, A, C, D. C and D talks about Bible. Actually, I can say AC is a mandatory pair because option C says AC, right? Then is a cause and effect indicator, must connect a reason and a result. Come to A once again. It uses very limited vocabulary and consistently avoids metaphors that can seem the very antithesis of style. It is hard to come to see. Then readers have not traditionally gone to the Bible in search of literally artfulness. Artfulness is a negative word. Artless is positive, artful is negative. An artful person is one who plays tricks on others, who cheats others, who deceives others, a cunning person. Whereas an artless person is a very sincere, straightforward, innocent, honest person. So even though artful sounds positive, it is negative. Artless sounds negative, but it is positive. Then readers have not traditionally gone to the Bible in search of literally artfulness, but for its religious value. There is no artfulness in the Bible because there's nothing tricky there. There's nothing confusing there because the Bible uses very limited vocabulary and consistently avoids metaphors. That means there is nothing tricky, nothing confusing. It's something, what is there in the Bible can be understood very easily by the readers. So the readers will not go to the Bible because of very limited vocabulary and constantly avoiding metaphors. The readers will not go to the Bible in search of literally artfulness. There will not be any kind of artfulness in the Bible because it uses very limited vocabulary and avoids metaphors. So readers go to the Bible not for artfulness but for its religious value. For the religious value of the Bible. It refers to Bible's religious value. So CD and AC must be a mandatory pair, and AC as mandatory pair comes in two options, B and C. B is anyway gone, the answer must be option C. Getting it? If you're not getting help of one concept, you forget about it. Think about some other concept. Come to the next one. According to David Hunter, a handle expert, these ailments were linked to lead poisoning brought on by his notoriously heavy consumption of rich foods and alcohol. George Frederick Handel was a binge eater and problem drinker whose gargantuan hepatitis resulted in lead poisoning that eventually killed him, according to a study. Surprisingly, little is known. Little means nothing. Little is known about Handel's private life, but evidence from portraits and descriptions supports the theory that he began to suffer from lead poisoning in 1737. By the time of his death, the composer of Messiah had for 20 years been fighting health problems, including blindness, gout, bouts of paralysis, and confused speech. In this sentence, in this passage, we find mention about names. The concept of names that we discussed. When you find names mentioned in a sentence, think about this concept. The sentence carrying the full name must appear before sentence carrying half the name. I'm not saying immediately before. In the case of pronouns, it is immediately before. Every pronoun must refer to a noun immediately before it. In the case of names, it is just this. The sentence carrying the full name must appear before sentence carrying half the name. In two sentences, we find mention about names. One is B and the other one is C. B says George Frederick Handel, the full name. C says Handel, half the name. Now tell me, can C come before B? No. C cannot come before B because C contains only half the name, whereas B contains a full name. C cannot come before B. Based on that, A is eliminated, B is eliminated, C is eliminated. The answer is D. Because of a single concept, right? The concept of names, we eliminated three options and we got an answer. The answer is D. So undoubtedly, answer must be D. There are other mandatory pairs here, but still the answer is D. Now here, we'll go over some other concepts. Come to sentence A. Sentence A says, these ailments. Ailments means diseases. If a sentence says, these ailments, immediately before the sentence, there must be a sentence containing mention about some ailments, diseases. In which sentence do you find mention about diseases? Sentence D. Sentence D says, fighting many health problems, including blindness, gout, bouts of paralysis, and confused speech. These are some diseases or ailments. So these ailments must refer to the ailments mentioned in D. So DA must be a mandatory pair. And DA as mandatory pair comes in two options, B and D. B is anyway gone, the answer is D. Then we have come to sentence D. By the time of his death. His is a pronoun. Every pronoun must refer to a noun immediately before it. I say, BD is a mandatory pair. Come to Bombay. George Frederick Handel was a binge eater and problem drinker whose gargantuan hepatitis resulted in lead poisoning that eventually killed him, according to a study. D says, by the time of his death. Whose death? George Frederick Handel's death. So BD is also a mandatory pair, and BD as mandatory pair comes only in one option, that is option D. So the answer must be D. So C cannot come before B based on the three options eliminated. BD is a mandatory pair based on the concept of pronoun antecedent, checking out for pronouns. And BD as mandatory pair comes only in one option, option D. So undoubtedly the answer must be D. All the concepts are fine here. Clear?